here's our panel, our esteemed panel. You can read all of their titles here, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time introducing them. They've all been active in AI either directly in their businesses or they have been consulting with people about the use of AI for natural products development. So that's what we're here to find out about, and these people are the ones who can tell you about it. And Scott, tell us a little bit about your company. I understand we're talking about a lot of polyphenolic ingredients in this case, and how is AI helpful in product development in that area?
So we actually have kind of two business units. We have a B2C brand, Vine to Bar, which is the one that's up on the screen, and that's a chocolate product. And for that product, I mean, we really kind of use AI the way that everyone else does, right? We're trying to optimize consumer messaging, figure out what resonates with people, and how to kind of refine that proposition. So that's I think is pretty standard. But on the raw material side, where we have an innovative new prebiotic, that's where we're using it primarily to de-risk innovation. So it's not so much about finding something that we didn't know about before or conceive of. It's not this kind of de novo approach to finding a completely new application. Instead, we have this constellation of choices that we can make about what we want to do with our product and our technology, where we want to invest. And what AI really does is it helps us to place better bets, right? So that we're not taking as big a risk when we do something, and we don't have to just learn empirically and really kind of throw darts out there and see what sticks. There's still an element of that to it, but AI really helps us to lower the risk profile of making those investments.
So one of the questions that we posed to the audience to begin with, one of the answers had to do with consumer perception. So, you know, I see this sometimes when I get press releases, new ingredients powered by AI seems to be, kind of a catchy phrase in the B2B context. How does it function in the B2C context? Are consumers, do they like the idea that a product is developed with the use of artificial intelligence, or could they find it threatening?
I think if you ask 10 consumers, you're going to get 12 answers. So, it's hard to really kind of predict where people are going to go with that. Some people really like the idea, and they think it's very interesting. Other people who don't know maybe as much about it, can feel a little threatened. We haven't leaned into it too heavily ourselves. I think other companies have done more of that, and some have done it pretty successfully. But from our point of view, right now, it's not a major characteristic of the way our product was done. Because, like I said before, we mostly use it to de-risk, which means that we could have done it without AI. It's just that AI made it either faster or cheaper or whatever. And it's not something that was created entirely that way. So, in a way, to say that it's an AI-created product when you're using that AI in that way may be actually a little disingenuous, because it's just one of the tools that you're using to create it using a process that consumers would already be familiar with. But we'll see. I mean, we'll see how people react to it. I think everyone is still kind of on the fence about that.
So we've been talking a lot about new and novel here, and AI is a path to find those kind of things. Do you think that AI could be a benefit in finding products that could be more easily patentable and could carry greater patents protections? Now, Scott, I know you've been involved with natural products development for a long time. This is always kind of a question in this industry is, how much money do you want to put in product development if somebody can just, nip in and kind of head you off at the pass? Do you think AI could help develop things that would be, more easily protected by patents?
I do, and one of the reasons is because the products that exist today are a reflection of the tools that were available to be able to measure and create those products when they were done, right? So I'll give you an example. We're working in the prebiotic space. Most prebiotics that are out there today, like FOS or GOS or inulin, they're very simple. They're simple because it was very difficult not only to characterize these things, but difficult to test them and to understand what the effects were as they became more complex. So as that complexity ramped up, your understanding of what was going on and how it worked, how it functioned, mechanisms of action, the results of downstream effects, et cetera, they were very difficult to parse out. And so as a result, the IP that surrounded those was based on the tools that you had to be able to analyze it. So in our case, we have a real food product. That means it has not only oligosaccharides, but it's got phenolics, it has vitamins, minerals, protein, fat. There's everything in there. And so when you start looking at trying to show why it's efficacious or why it does what it does, without a new tool, a tool that we didn't have even 10 years ago, that wouldn't have been something we could do very well. And AI allows us to do that because you can kind of cut through that complexity and get down to mechanisms that are relevant not only for understanding what makes the product work well, but also how to protect it and how to describe it in a way that is legally protectable.
So just a quick question. Have any of you had any unofficial conversations with anybody at FDA concerning the use of AI?
Yes.
Quick answer.
I think this ties back a little bit, though, to your previous question about becoming more drug-like and having the industry move away from kind of natural products and more toward, I call it pharmaceutical envy, right? This idea that everything we do should be reductionist, trying to simplify it, trying to get down to, well, what's the active ingredient in your product, right? What's the marker compound or the compound in there that's responsible for its effects? And I think everyone in this room understands that natural products, the reason they work is because they are complex. And embracing that complexity, I think, is really an important thing. AI finally gives us a way to help people understand what we've been talking about for 40 years, which is that natural products in all of their complicated glory and all of their messiness have effects that other things don't, that things that are created synthetically, that are, again, a product of a reductionist approach can't do. And so, my vision for how we use AI in this industry is to embrace that and to lean into it more heavily. And I think that's not only good because it does actually match the effects that we've seen for all these decades, but also because consumers are actually starting to go that way too. So when we first started talking about WellVine, our prebiotic, we called it a smart prebiotic. And that was interesting to people. And it had something that kind of leaned toward AI and that language in that by saying it was smart. But then as we started to talk about it to people more and we started looking at other ways of describing it, we started talking about it as a whole food, then we started talking about it as a real food, and consumer interest shot through the roof. I mean, that was really very interesting to them. So I think it's not only good that way, and for regulators, once they understand that we're not genetically modifying these things simply because we're using AI, we're not using AI to somehow change the nature of it, just to understand it. Just like with consumers, regulators, I think, also will be more friendly to what we're doing.
So in other words, AI might be a way to help put teeth into these claims like entourage or full spectrum, like where you might have a berry ingredient that's got 70 different polyphenols in it. What are they all doing, right?
That's right, and you shouldn't be chasing a higher and higher potency of only one of those and trying to create essentially a purified product out of it, which is what has always given FDA a lot of anxiety when it came to new dietary ingredients in the first place, right? How much are you concentrating or modifying it?
So at least in the popular press, there's been a lot of talk about the use of AI and coming up with so-called hallucinations. So this seems to be more mentioned in connection with language models, and there was a famous case of the AI that tried to pick the guy up or whatever, dump your wife, come with me. But when you're dealing with results in natural product development, I mean, is it possible for you to come up with something that is a mistake? And unless you've got some really talented biochemists on staff, you're going to go a long way down the road before you realize it's a mistake.
At this point where in deploying AI and machine learning, you need to ground your data. I know I sound like a broken record at this point, but you need a domain expert that helps you ground that data. That's just a very fancy way of saying that you need to verify it. And if you're doing that early and often, I don't think you're going to go down the wrong path.
So in other words, then, whatever costs, I'm sorry, did you want to?
I was just going to say, we had an experience with this where I think if we hadn't understood it and caught it early on, that the mistakes that were inherent in this, would have propagated and become much larger over time. Specifically, we started looking into oligosaccharide chemistry, and unlike the phenolic chemistry that we were dealing with, the terminology surrounding oligosaccharide chemistry isn't very well standardized. So you'll read, papers that are talking about the exact same molecule or family of molecules, and the researchers will refer to them in different ways because they don't have a standardized lexicon for oligosaccharide chemistry yet. It's just not well developed enough. So we had to go through and actually translate it and then teach the AI model using those translated terms so that it was standardized across everything. Otherwise, we would have ended up with a result that was completely different than what was intended, right? And what AI does is does pattern recognition, essentially. It's looking for patterns. If those patterns don't exist, or they're based on data that changes, it'll invent something that it thinks is as close as it can get, and that's where the hallucinations come from.
So we got some questions from the audience, so I want to make sure that we have time to address those. I think one of the questions here is there's a feeling we've been talking about AI in pretty general terms. So what actual tools, if you can name some brand names, what are you guys actually using?
So we don't actually have an in-house AI platform or anything that we've bought and implemented. We use a third party that we work with. So we have a partner that has developed it for us. The one thing they did develop, though, that we do use in-house is a dashboard, which has actually been very useful for our researchers. So, one of the things that I really like about it, if you build it correctly, is that you don't have to think up all the questions that you want to know immediately the first time you do the AI analysis, right? It's not like you have to know in advance everything that you want to know. Instead, you create this dashboard which can be queried and which you can ask additional questions of that are based on that same database, so they can go in when those things occur to them and as it comes up through the research process and essentially go back and remine that data again. And that's been really useful for us. So that was an interesting approach. The company that we used is called Pippa, and we chose them because the people who are involved with it not only are data scientists, but they actually have a couple of hundred published papers on the microbiome. So we wanted some domain expertise as well.
So if you are going to go outside, if you're a smaller company, you don't want to necessarily develop in-house AI expertise, and you want to go to a contractor. What kind of questions should you ask them to make sure that they know what they're doing? I mean, there's some questions that you would ask to any subcontractor, any supplier, but are there any specific to AI to make sure that you don't end up with, poor quality service?
Yeah, so when we were going through that process, as I said, domain expertise was one of the things we were very interested in because, as I kind of pointed out with the oligosaccharide thing, it really is a very manual process making sure that the data is ready to go. So it's not like you just take a bunch of raw data and throw it into an AI platform and expect to get something good out of it. The curation process is very labor intensive. Wes keeps talking about this, and I agree with him completely. I think data hygiene is the most important part of the whole thing, honestly. So that's what you need to understand is how are they going to make sure that the data hygiene part of it is really well done and well taken care of and that it's applicable to the business that you have. I think that's job number one. The kind of, what software you're using, how many teraflops can you do, I don't think any of that's really all that important, honestly. What it really comes down to is that human part of it, the human intelligence, and that's what we were looking for.
So here's a question that just came in. AI is applied statistics at its core. How do you get away from over-interpretation of that data? How do you know the bioinformatics, how do the known bioinformatics problems like DNA double splicing problem affect your analysis?
That's a good one.
Should we just allow that one to vanish into the ether, or?
I'm not a data scientist, so I can't tell you what the mathematics or anything are behind it, but I do think it goes back to what we keep saying, which is if you start with good data and you're very careful about the inputs you give, you can avoid a lot of those problems, right? Because it'll take the attributes that you have, the mistakes that you make initially in setting things up, and it will amplify those. This is an amplification problem. So you just have to be very disciplined about what you do before you actually do the analysis, and then to a certain extent you have to trust the process after that. But if you do a good job setting it up, my experience is that you come out with good outputs.
Yeah, and to add on to that, I think that was a perfect answer, but you also need to have diverse training sets. That's really important so that you don't have over-reliance on a specific set of data.
So here's kind of an interesting question. It could have a very quick answer. What is the greatest discovery as of now after AI has been implemented in the dietary supplement industry in terms of new formulas and or new ingredients found? And the reason why I think it could be simple is everybody would just say, hey, the stuff I'm selling, right? So if there's, if you could just say how is AI, what's the greatest way it's transformed the industry? Is there like one big win you could say, we couldn't have done this before and we're doing it now easily?
I think the other thing that it does, we know probably more than any other group on the planet about Chardonnay grapes, right? But we don't know hardly anything about a lot of other stuff. So when we talk about combination products, to go out and train somebody in how does our product work with colostrum, or how does our product work with collagen, or how does our product work with whatever it is, that would be very difficult to do. You'd have to find that person, you'd have to train them, integrate them somehow. But AI can go out there and actually look at these other things and then tell you some of the benefits of combination products, how they might work together with a much higher degree of confidence than you'd otherwise have. So it basically opens up the world of other ingredients for combination products and for synergies in a way that you couldn't otherwise do unless you had a really good partner in each one of those areas.
I think that's a great point. I think it opens a lot of door on our side, for example, into like novel microbial strains, like those next gen strains potentially. It enables us to really kind of like have first of all discover and start growing those things, which is sometimes not quite easy, but also have like a great head start into potentially developing new products with those next gen strains. We've recently invested in a library of Christensen minuta, for example, and our work process has been so much faster than what I think it would have been like 10 years ago even. So yeah.
Hit a lot of the high points, but it's a huge topic, and just like the one I did yesterday, thinking, well, we might end up having a whole morning seminar on AI and how it's being used, what are some of the big wins, maybe a case study. So we'll be looking for that in the future, and once again, thanks everybody who came. Also, please, if you haven't done so before, click on the QR code and please take that quick survey. We're just asking a minute or two of your time, and it would help us do a better job for you in the future. So thanks.